Welcome to the Power Hour. I'm your host, Eugene Shatsman. This is Optometry's biggest and longest running show. We are in our 13th season on the air. Please make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows, just so that you know every time an episode drops. And on that topic, I really enjoyed today's episode. So this is my semi-annual conversation with the Vision Council, where we cover typically two things. Number one, Vision Expo, and number two, industry data. And I'm going to talk about the data in a moment because it was actually an incredibly valuable conversation, literally hot off the presses reports. But first, are you going to Vision Expo East 2025? If you're listening to this episode and you're still undecided, my hope is that in this episode, we will help you decide one way or another. I peppered Ashley Mills, she's the CEO of the Vision Council, with fast-paced questions. And again, my hope is that in the first 15 minutes of this episode or so, you have an idea of how the Vision Expo experience is changing for the Orlando show and what you can expect if you go. Ashley talks about all the new and shiny things, as well as major upgrades that they've invested into the show for the attendees, all the stuff that's going to be great, all the stuff that they're working on, and hopefully you'll get enough here during the show to determine if Expo is right for you this year. For me, I'm going. I'll be taping a few Power Hour episodes from some of the innovators booths. So if you're going, I'll see you there. And in the second half of the show, we talk with Alysse Henkel. She is the VP of Research and Insights at the Vision Council. And yet again, we lean into her massive data set on three things: consumer transactions, EHR data from thousands of practices, and surveys that people fill out. And we use all of that to figure out what is the market telling us and what do we need to know at this exact moment. And let's just be clear, this is not old news. The show was actually taped before the big data reveal is even made to the entire industry. So if you want to know what happened to the consumer in 2024 regarding purchase of frames, lenses, contact lenses, and also what happened with exams in 2024, you need to listen in. I'm not going to give you the punchline right now, but I will tell you there's a really clear and somewhat alarming conclusion that we have to draw. And this conclusion requires action from you. If you own a practice, if you work in a practice, whatever, we have to change our behavior in 2025 so that we can learn from 2024 and not repeat our mistakes, because the data is telling us this clearly. Okay. And I love data. I know many of our listeners do as well. So hopefully you enjoy this episode. And I wanted to offer a quick reminder that if you have any episode ideas for future episodes, content suggestions, questions, or any way that I can be a resource, please reach out to me directly. If you go to eugeneshatsman.com and drop me a note, again, that's eugeneshatsman.com, or you can do that on the Power Hour website. I truly enjoy being a resource for you, and I truly enjoy your feedback. And now let's go to the show. Ashley Mills, Alysse Henkel, welcome back to the Power Hour. We're excited to have you and so much to talk about. As I said during the introduction, the big thing that we're going to get to towards the end of the show is you got a big report that's coming out, or maybe the second half of the show is you have a big report that's literally coming out today when the show is airing. And that report is going to talk to us about overall market sentiment, market estimates, and how did we do in 2024 so that we can make really good decisions about 2025. But one of the things that we really need to talk about is what we're going to do in 2025. And I think a lot of people are trying to decide, are we going to go to Expo? Are we going to go to the new Vision Expo East? At the time that this episode is dropping, I think you can still get a hotel, right? This has been a pretty, maybe that's like an indicator of how many people are pre-registered and how excited the community is about the show. So I guess maybe that's my first question, Ashley. Maybe not the most insightful or deep question, but are the hotels sold out or not? Because then we know if people are going or not.
Well, people are going. You can still get a hotel and you can still register, and we would love to have you. So Vision Expo East has moved. It will be in Orlando, Florida, February 19th through the 22nd. I'd invite all of you who are interested, if you would like to still access free registration, go to the Vision Expo website, or you can type in VEE2025.com and then /TVC. And the Vision Council would be happy to offer you complimentary registration. If you're coming from Southeast Florida from Miami, I can also offer you 50% off the very nice and brand new Bright Line, the train running between Miami and Orlando. You just have to be registered for the show and use the code all caps Vision. And yes, you will be able to find a hotel. Our main hotel blocks have sold out, but we still have rooms at the Rosen Inn, Point Orlando, the Hyatt Regency Orlando, and True by Hilton. And for the hotels that aren't connected directly to the convention center, we have constant shuttle buses running from all of our hotels. So you will have absolutely no trouble getting to the show. And we can't wait to welcome you there.
So, what are the big? And so it sounds like there's already a lot of buzz because I'm hearing the main hotel blocks are sold out, which means that there's a lot of people who have pre-registered, and it seems like what I've been hearing in the industry is there's a lot of buzz. Although it's a different month, so because it's a different month, that's one difference. What are some of the other differences that people can expect?
Well, one reason to come to Vision Expo, we all know that everyone is very busy. Your listeners are trying to manage practices and optimize staff time. This is the show that you can come to and accomplish everything you need to do in a handful of days. All of the exhibitors that you need to meet with are there, from the high-end luxury designers like Anna Karin Carlson to the Clear Vision Opticals of the world, Moto, Tom Davies, Silhouette, Kering will be there, Dita, everyone's there. Plus on the eye care side, Zeiss is going to be there in Grand Fashion, hosting an amazing beer garden experience. And we have TopCon, I guess all of that is to say, this is the place to do all of your business in a short amount of time. And we also, of course, offer 240 hours of continuing education. So your team can also come and make sure they're getting their education. You can do it easily, and you can do it all in Orlando. That's nothing new. What is new is everything we've added this year to really look at how practices can boost margin. So obviously there'll be tons of opportunities for networking, but we've added dedicated networking just for our conference attendees, either on the healthcare or the fashion side. That is hopefully to give you an opportunity to come out of education and have a group of peers that you can talk to about what's working for them and what isn't. In addition, we're launching new pavilions to start talking about ways to expand the business. And maybe get your sales up a little bit. So we've launched an over-the-counter pavilion. So you can talk about how incorporating non-RX into your practice might be a margin booster and revenue driver. We also have a Indie Lab speakeasy if you're looking for how you can partner with some of the new labs that are coming online. There are a lot of them. And hang out and have a conversation about how to build some strategic partnerships. That's some of the new things. We're also doing.
So go back to the first one. So talking. Yeah. So I've had other guests on the show who have talked about the value of being able to collaborate with other practices and kind of form little study groups and to compare notes and see what. So talk about the first one, because I think you said it quickly, but I want to make sure the audience understands the gravity of this new thing that's going to be in Orlando in February.
Sure. So, of course, we have our continuing education program. So anyone registered for conference will be invited to these networking events that are dedicated for conference. So we have the healthcare side of the equation. And then we also have those who are coming to talk about buying and fashion. So between treatment, expansion of practice, different RXs that you're looking at, and then also different product lines, there will be dedicated places for you to talk with peers about that. And then we'll also have all of the programming that's not for continuing education credit. We have a really robust main stage this year. So you can trend spot a little bit and see what's coming out and what's new, and take that back to your practice and implement it.
Yeah. And what do you think are going to be so you talked about the OTC stuff and about kind of the independent lab stuff. What do you think are some of the trends that are really going to be highlighted, at least, without giving too much away, that you think if somebody wants to learn about X, and that X is, kind of on the horizon or kind of been something the industry has been toying with. Where have you made the investment to help highlight those trends?
I can give you a couple examples. Myopia is not a new trend, but it's certainly something that every practice needs to be addressing and equipped for. And I believe it's your data that told us that that's the leading search on Google, or it's
Leading
outpacing
growth, yes.
in growth. Yeah. So,
Mhm.
so we're offering a brand new myopia control symposium. That's a 3-hour session covering financial, clinical, and marketing strategies around myopia management. We know the patient is interested, and so we want to equip all of the practices attending our show with the ways to incorporate it and optimize both care and the business side of delivery. We have a new technology showcase. Some of the new things that we're waiting for Nuance to finally be available, but incorporating products that are wearables that treat or can help a patient with both vision and hearing continues to trend. We also saw the launch of Optero to really, again, start looking at ways that existing technology can very discreetly and efficiently help your patients manage, in this case with Optero, low vision through their phone.
Yeah, and it seems like almost everybody is doing something with AI these days. It's almost like one of the jokes that I heard around my office is that, well, some of our clients are folks who are exhibiting an expo, and it's almost like a necessary now to just like take the old booth design and slap like now with AI on the old booth design, whether you're making glasses or or you have software that serves the industry. But all kidding aside, I know that all of the exhibitors, or many of the exhibitors, have made significant investments in technology over the course of the last year. So how do you think that'll come out in the show?
We have it front and center on our main stage on Friday, February 21st. There is a session called The AI Advantage, Shaping Eye Care Today and Tomorrow. So not just in the conceptual stage of understanding AI, but really gets into how it can revolutionize and transform clinical workflow, patient care, and practice management. So something that you can absolutely learn from and take back and put into practice immediately.
Yeah. All right. So you've been talking about this, and I think the word the encapsulating word seems to be experience. So the experience in Orlando is going to be a little bit different. Obviously, it's warmer than New York would be at this time of year. You've talked about some of the different amenities or offerings, I guess, inside of on the show floor and on the stage and in the CEs. What else experientially is somebody like give me a little bit more of a visual download so that I can picture it right now. So if I am a listener who's sitting on the sidelines and saying, well, maybe I'm not going to go, that I can actually make that decision and maybe change my decision.
If you have 1, 2, or 3 days, this is the show for the optical community. This is the event that is in existence to promote the growth of the entire optical industry. So you're already part of kind of a catalyzer in success, growth, and fortitude for all of optical. How that will look when you get there, it's a totally different layout in Orlando. The hotels are attached. You walk right across into the exhibit hall. When you walk out of the exhibit hall each afternoon, you will walk right over to the Rosen Hotel where there will be a pool party taking place. You will come down the elevator and the OWA champagne breakfast will be in your hotel. It is very much built around community and the value of this community. And there will be multiple ways for people to meet people, see people, connect, and also just engage. I think it will feel much more experiential than transactional. And there's no shortage of things going on. So opening night party, open to everyone, several different music genres, DJs, bands, all of that's open for everyone attending our show. We have a new cafe that's French themed. We're able to do cooler things experientially with food and beverage at the show. There are daily happy hours and networking events. both on the show floor and at all of the flagship hotels. So I feel like the connectivity will really be there. And isn't that one of the reasons that people bother to travel and go to events? It's to feel like you're part of your community, and it will definitely be there, and you will feel it in Orlando.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right, because it seems to me like people go to shows for three reasons. And in my mind, there's one of them is to transact, right? You just show up and you sell or buy or whatever is happening. Another one is to connect with people. And the third is to learn. And in my opinion, the hardest thing, honestly, after you leave a show is to take action on what you do. And oftentimes the driver of action is the experience that you had and how memorable some of the things were. So, the transactions, yeah, sure, that's easy. You take a purchase order, whatever. But it also seems to me like previous shows that, and whether yours or there's different events in the industry that are really focused on transacting. There's good deals. People go to shop. If I need something, I'm going to go to that show. I'm going to shop or that kind of thing. I think what you're describing, though, is a really, really big focus on the other two elements as well, which is that, yeah, people can buy, right? And I'm sure there's going to be great vendors who give great specials, and it's going to be an opportunity to lock in some good discounts. But it also seems to me like experientially, you're trying to make this super memorable and super effective from a connecting with people standpoint, and also from a learning standpoint, because you can learn from others in lots of different ways. You can watch them on stage, or you can have those types of curated conversations, whether it's a happy hour or at a follow-up and that kind of thing. And so I commend you guys for doing all of this work and, really supporting and really developing this new experience for the industry. Is there anything else you want to add about the show before we start talking about data here?
Yeah, I'll just leave you with, in addition, we've really upped our programming game on the main stage, and are thrilled to welcome Venus Williams as our keynote on Friday afternoon in the exhibit hall. We feel like Venus really embodies the spirit of our industry, which is one of innovation and function and performance, and also you can't overlook fashion with Venus, but she's really going to speak with extreme focus on the importance of vision and her success. And I think she's going to be a really great energy builder for the whole show floor. And she is definitely our keynote, but that stage will be packed with programming all day long. So something really, honestly, for everyone, no matter how many days you're able to get away. You can certainly make the most of it at Vision Expo.
I mean, Venus Williams sounds great, but I'm surprised you didn't say that, the main draw is the 4 or 5 Power Hour episodes that are going to be filmed live on the show floor. So, I mean, I guess I understand. I'm kidding. No, that's fantastic. Thank you, Ashley, for sharing all that. And I asked for the audience, I really did ask Ashley to compress all of the things that we need to know now into like 10 to 15 minutes so that we can make a really sound decision. Are we going? Are we not going? And are we going for 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days? And is it an experience that we want to take a part of? And Ashley, I think you've done a phenomenal job summarizing it. Thank you so much. And after the break, we're going to talk a lot about industry data. So this is kind of a 2-for-1 episode where we get to leverage the Vision Council for the amazing event they're about to go put on, but then also for the data points, the millions and millions of data points that they've been collecting. And we'll talk about how that data is going to impact what you do in 2025.
Thank you, Eugene.
Hi, this is Allie at the Power Practice. Every month when we talk to clients, staffing comes up as one of the biggest challenges. Finding the right people, avoiding costly hiring mistakes, and trying to build a team that actually sticks around. It can feel like an uphill battle, right? What if you could finally take the guesswork out of hiring? That's why we're so excited to bring you Hire Smart by Wonderlic and the Power Practice, a hiring solution designed specifically for eye care practices. Here's the game changer. Hire Smart doesn't just measure cognitive ability, problem-solving skills, and learning speed. It also gives you exclusive insights into a candidate's work style, adaptability, and even how they'll fit into your practice culture. Imagine making a confident, informed decision before you even make the hire. And the best part, we've made it affordable and easy to use so you can start building your dream team right away. If staffing has been stressing you out, it's time to turn things around. Visit thepowerpractice.com and click on Hire Smart to get started. Let's help you hire smarter and stress less.
All right, and we're back on the Power Hour with Alysse Henkel to talk through the data. Now, Alysse, remind me your role. What is your official title at the Vision Council?
I am the Vice President of Research and Insights at the Vision Council.
Okay, so that sounds like a big role, but I don't think people quite get how big, because what do you guys actually resource? What is the source of all of the data that you gather? How many data points do you have?
So we have a ton of data, and the data that feeds into our reporting, we have like a few different important data sources. So one is transactional data. So we get anonymized feeds from patient management system data that's sort of been cleaned up and normalized as much as possible. So that we understand what's going on in our practice, what down to the billing code level. So we have a lot of detail.
How many practices or how many transactions maybe?
Well, how many transactions? I don't know. We get new data each month, but I would say we're probably pretty clearly in the like 60 million records somewhere along the way of transactions. So a ton of patient transaction data. We get somewhere around 2,700 practices feeding into that data pool each year. So we're getting a really good sample of, especially the independent locations. This is primarily coming from independent locations throughout the US. So that's one of our foundational data sources, along with, we also have credit card data. So knowing like how much was spent on a credit card. So we don't know what was purchased like we do with the patient transaction data, but we know sort of how much someone swiped their card for again, a sample of credit card data throughout the US. And that's another, I don't know, probably at least like 20 million plus records there that we get. We also get that data updated monthly. And then our other big sources are like location data. So we've done a ton of work trying to nail down how many optical retail practices or independent practices there are in the US. So that's one of the things that feeds into especially our market estimates. And then finally, we also do a ton of surveying. So we have a consumer tracker survey that connects with, in the US, 4,000 people every month to ask what their recent behaviors were related to eye care and eyewear. So we have a data feed on that every month with 4,000 new American adults. We're doing a smaller version in Canada right now with 500 respondents a month. And then we also do a lot of ad hoc surveying as well. So we'll survey, we do regularly survey practice providers as well, so practice owners or folks who work in eye care practices as a sort of tracker twice a year to sort of see what things look like from the practice perspective. But we'll also run additional surveys and produce reports that are of interest to our members, like a report about, how consumers make decisions about eyewear or eye care, or what's going on with, what do consumers know about myopia, or et cetera. So those are sort of our more ad hoc reports that we do, about 6 to 10 of those a year, as well as all these regular reporting with these other data sources.
So you've got these millions and millions of data points that are feeding in. And again, I'm going to restate it for the audience. We've got surveys, we've got credit card transactions, consumer credit card transactions, and then we've got practice management system data, anonymized practice management system data for thousands of practices. So interestingly enough, for me, this, I couldn't help but wonder, is there anybody with more data about the industry than you?
Certainly not that I know of. I mean, so the big companies probably have more data than I do about, individual records that go on within their own business. So, corporations, if you want to send us your data, we're open to it. But I think outside of that, there's probably no one else with like a really comprehensive view of the industry, both from the practice perspective and the consumer perspective.
And I don't think that I could convince anybody at the top of either of those companies to come on the show and open their books and tell me everything that's going on and what they're seeing from a consumer standpoint. So, and obviously that data is very biased. Yours seems a little bit more balanced. So, in my opinion, this is probably this is one of the reasons why I look forward to having you on the show on a regular cadence, is because I love making data-driven decisions, and I encourage constantly in our business, every single decision, we're trying to ask a question, even if it's a small decision of, hey, we want to change the button color on a client's website, or a big decision of, should a client acquire this location or not acquire this location. All of those, we're always asking the question of what data did we use to make this decision? And the second question we're asking is, what impact do we expect this decision to have based off of previous data? So I think this is why it's so important to be so abreast of what the data is telling us in the industry, because we truly have to think through all the implications. And I like having this episode early enough in the year to where, we can still get a head start on using data about 2024 to make decisions in 2025. So I'm going to kind of no further with no further delays. I really want you to get into the latest data that you all have available for us in 2025.
Yeah, so our absolutely hot off the presses, just released today data is our big annual market insights reports. And so that has data on what happened the previous year in the market, specifically relating to exams, frames, lenses, contact lenses, plano sunglasses, and readers, both in terms of how many units were sold and sort of the value of the market. So this is always our big deal report of the year, where we talk about the overall market size and how things have changed year to year. And so what we've seen in 2024 is that we are seeing like a 2.7% growth for the whole market combined together, going up to $68.3 billion industry in 2024. But we are seeing overall some declines, especially on the kind of like prescription products. We saw a little bit of year over year decline from 23 to 24, and we saw actually some substantial growth on especially the plano sunglasses side of the market. So it's kind of a mixed story this year about, what happened last year. Looks like some things went really well, and other parts kind of remained kind of stable year over year, and some saw some small declines as well.
Okay, Alysse, so you're telling me that the industry grew a few percentage points in 2024, but you're also telling me that there was an overall decline in prescription product. Talk about that decline and quantify that for us a little bit.
Yeah. So overall, when we're talking, I'll talk about value first. So sort of the when we talk about value in the market, we're talking about how much consumers spent plus managed vision care reimbursement. When we're talking about the prescription products, when we're talking about the non-prescription products, we're just talking about consumer spending. So what we saw for frames in terms of a value decline, we saw year over year a 5% decline in terms of the frames market. For lenses, it was largely stable year to year, showing about a 1% decline year over year. So lenses held a little bit more stable than frames did this year. And then contact lenses, they had a great 2023. And generally that pattern was holding most of this year until Q4 was really tough for contact lenses. This is the worst Q4 we've seen in the last 3 years for contact lenses, resulting in overall a 2% decline year over year for contact lenses. So that's in terms of value. So how much was spent in the market. On the volume, so the how many units were sold, we still see a decline in frames at 4% there. And for lenses, so fewer lenses were sold, negative 3% decline there, and then contact lenses, negative 5%. So the story is, generally for these products that I think in some cases, like frames, we're especially seeing people kind of shift to the budget category. So they're spending less on their frames than they were in the past. And, that's what we're seeing across the board. Like generally the demand is similar, but not quite as high as it was last year.
Okay, so and maybe just do one more time the distinction between units sold and total dollars spent, because I think, are we losing? Just do it one more time so that I can wrap my mind around it.
Sure. So frames, the value, the sales dropped by 5%, and the units sold dropped by 4%. So those the decline was sort of in line, although there were more frames sold in 2024 than there were in 2022. So, we are seeing some over 2-year growth, but we're not seeing the 1-year growth. For lenses, the value, so the sales declined -1%, so 1% decline there. And in terms of units for lenses sold, it was a -3% decline. So that means that, people are buying a little bit fewer lenses, but on the fewer lenses, they're spending a tiny bit more. And then for contact lenses, we saw the value drop about 2% in terms of sales, and the units dropped 5%. And so they also dropped lower in terms of units than 2022, but there was a big growth from 22 to 23. So it sort of seems like contact lenses have kind of leveled out a little bit this year.
And is the decline heaviest in Q3 and 4? Or was it spread all over the year?
It kind of depends on the product, whether or not it was spread year to year or spread throughout the year or just in the quarter. Quickly looking at this data here when I have it by quarter, contact lenses is what really saw the decline in Q4, just sort of, kind of fell off a cliff in Q4. And I right now, this number is fresh to me too. So we're still digging into the whys of that a little bit. But, overall, kind of thinking this story is a little bit around like regression to the mean, that there's some economic uncertainty in the marketplace. And so people are, buying fewer products, or especially in the case of contact lenses, maybe stretching to make their product last longer, wearing them less often, or wearing them potentially longer than prescribed. But yeah, I would say overall, the other markets, we saw lenses have a strong Q1. But overall, the frame and lenses sales otherwise have been pretty consistent with normal patterns quarter to quarter, just a little bit less volume or sales revenue. What
about is there any exam data to normalize this?
Yeah, so that's what I was just going to talk about for exams. So actually exams, we saw a slight increase in exams this year.
Interesting.
Yep. So we're seeing a 3% growth year over year for exam revenue. And we're seeing a 1% growth in terms of the number of exams that happened at eye care practices.
Wow.
So, people are spending a little more out of pocket, perhaps now with exams than they were before. It could be with sort of special imaging or whatnot that are different options for an exam to, have a little bit more revenue than they did in years past. So that's where we were likely seeing that revenue growth from. But then just, a 1% increase in exams. So it basically means that more people are going to the optometrist, but likely buying fewer product from them.
And do you have a sense of whether those exams are typically, is there a distinction between medical exams and what we'd call just kind of standard refractions?
Yeah, so we don't have sort of that level of detail in the data. It's not always sort of coded in the way that we would be able to do that analysis easily in our patient transaction data. So this is where generally we're talking about like a comprehensive eye exam, but not necessarily being able to tell the difference in every case of those exam counts if they're just a basic refraction or if it's the more sort of medical.
Yeah. So this brings up probably when I think about, and I had no idea what the data was before I brought you on the show. And in fact, you told me you couldn't tell me until today. So the reality is that this actually, my really big focus in talking with our clients and talking with the industry, we've had this really big focus. And the show, I'm going to say last week, was the show about we had a guest on who talked about his experience with exam onlys. And so one of the reasons I brought on that particular guest is because I think that capture rate is a struggle point for the industry. Mm-hmm. And it certainly looks like the capture rate is, we have more exams, right? But we have fewer dollars and units in product sales. What does that mean? That means that we're letting revenue walk out the door. And this is it. It's like the past two shows, both Gary Gerber and Jamie Rosen, both have talked about how this is this is a huge area of focus. Focusing on your optical conversion rate is such a big area of focus for the optometric community for 2025. And it's like and I'm a huge proponent of that mindset as well, but your data absolutely confirms it. We have to fight just a little bit harder. We had to fight a little bit harder in 2024 for the budget, for our share of the budget of the consumer, than we did in the previous year. And this trend will continue unless we get better. Because it's not like consumers are saying, oh, inflation is no longer a problem for me and I'm willing to spend money on just about everything. I think consumers are still saying we're feeling the squeeze.
Yeah.
So if that's what the consumer is typically saying, then the reality is that, we have to work just a little bit harder in our optical to be able to convert that patient from just an exam to an exam plus, unit sales, right? So
yeah. I would just add that, so on Jamie Rosen, who's our incoming board chair for the Vision Council, he has also talked to us about sort of the importance of, that capture rate. So we did some calculations about what the market would look like if the capture rate were better. So I think you'll find that really interesting, that if we grew the volume of frames, lenses, contact lenses, and exams, like if we grew those, frames, lenses, and contact, if we grew those by 5% in terms of, the number of units sold, we would see an increase in the market of $1.4 billion.
Wow.
And it would go from a 2.7% year over year growth for the whole market to a 4.8% growth year over year for the market. So that kind of capture rate, has a waterfall effect on everything.
Okay, so hold on one second. So how many optometrists are there?
Well, so we have just shy of 44,000 practice locations in the
Okay,
US,
great.
which
Yeah,
is how we track it.
yeah.
Yeah. And so we're seeing on average, the practice revenue for 2024 in our data set was $906,000.
Mhm.
And if they sold 5% more units, then it would be an increase in that practice just of $34,000 a year.
Yeah.
But then, when we multiply it up by all of those practices, that's where we get those numbers in the billions for the industry.
And that makes perfect sense. And if you think about that additional $30,000 in a $900,000 practice, what's interesting about that is that 1/3 of that is going to be cost, but 2/3 of that is not going to be cost that you have to incur because you're already spending money on the optician, you're already spending money on the rent, you're already spending. So it's really 2/3. So that extra $30,000, if you could just increase your capture rate by 5%, that extra money, 2/3 of that money drops right down to the bottom line, the profitability of the practice, which is kind of an incredible thing to think about, because if I think about that point, you're out of that $1.4 billion, think of how much, because all of that is incremental, think of how much more profit that is for the optometric community. So if 2/3 of that drops straight to the profit, drops straight to the profit line of the optometric community, of the practice owners who are listening to the show, it's an extra, like, almost $1 billion in profit for the industry, wealth for the industry, so they can invest in more locations, they can invest in better patient care, they can invest in better equipment and more treatment modalities and all those types of things. It's just a kind of a really interesting point that your data truly supports this completely. I would say it's not an overlooked opportunity. We all know we need to, but just quantifying how important this is for the average practice. We're all selling frames, lenses, contact lenses. The reality is that if we could just do a little bit better, your data absolutely supports that the patient isn't going to make it easier for us. So we need to get better, and we need to be able to serve the patient more holistically.
Yeah, and 5% I think is, very modest. So like if you're looking at, let's say, selling 1,000 frames a year, that's just an increase of 50 frames.
Right.
That is a very modest increase, but can, like you said, have a big impact on the bottom line.
Increase of 50 frames. If I can sell an extra two, that's roughly
That's like
an
a
extra
frame a week.
four
a
frames
frame
a
a
month,
week.
a frame a week.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
Mhm.
that's something, and it's a really, really interesting point. Okay, so I think this is really great and interesting and informative information. Let's talk about other data points that you have, or other surveys or polls that you've done, just so that the audience knows that, in addition to this overall market estimate stuff, I guess, what's the conclusion of that study? Let's talk about that. And then maybe let's touch a little bit about on some of the other studies you've done.
Sure. So I would say, we're using this data to then also, our report includes a forecast for 2025. So we're looking at expecting, like, our frames volume to sort of hold for this year, based on the past data that we have and what we're expecting in 2025. We're looking still probably with contact lenses to be a little bit on the decline, maybe a -1% for contact lenses this next year. And we're expecting this sort of exam counts to be relatively stable this year. So that's kind of what our data is telling us about what's going to happen in 2025. But I will say there's a number of things that we're keeping our eye on, sort of the issue with a new administration and tariffs and imports, that's going to potentially have an effect not only on our industry, but overall potentially on consumer spending. So that's something we're keeping a close eye on, both our government relations team and my research team, who keeps an eye on consumer spending. Some of the other reports that we're coming out with this year include a report on AI use in the industry. So that will be out, I think, in time for Vision Expo East. So that's something we're keeping our eye on, as well as, some other trends in the market that we're paying attention to include like remote eye exams. So not only like exams done on like a phone when the patient or whatever is at home, but also when an eye care provider is joining an exam remotely from a different location. We're seeing about 3% now of consumers telling us that they're that they're going in person for an exam, but that their provider is joining remotely. So that's also something we're sort of keeping our ear to the ground on and tracking that over time. But the other data that we have recently published includes a report on consumer choices about so this is a trended report. We did a similar survey back in 2022. So this is a look 2 years later. What are people telling us about how they make decisions about their eye care and their eyewear? And then in a couple weeks ago, we released a report on information from folks who work at practices who buy frames, and trying to understand a little bit more about what they're buying and what their frame board makeup looks like, et cetera. So happy to talk about any or
Yeah,
all of
so
those.
let's talk about the consumer choices for a few minutes. So what did you learn? What did you find?
Yeah, so overall, we're seeing patterns, hold pretty steady from 2022, but some of the interesting things where we saw growth related to when people are choosing an eye exam provider, that we're seeing. So in 2022, 70% of folks told us it was important to them that the practice was in their insurance network, whereas in 2024, we see 77% of folks saying that that's important to them. So we're seeing an increase in people wanting to make sure they stay in network with their managed vision care provider. So, having coverage for their exam is top of mind for folks.
Which I mean, perfectly ties in with consumer is more budget sensitive.
Yep.
And because they're more budget sensitive, they think that they're going to maximize their budget by having an in-network provider. Okay, that's interesting and supports consumer sentiment as much as absolutely true. Okay.
And something else, so we asked people like why they made a purchase in person, and for those who made a purchase online of eyewear, we asked them about that too. So I think some of the interesting things there around the eyewear is that we saw an increase from 2022 to 2024 in terms of what people are saying that they're looking for, why they bought online. And one of the cases was speed of delivery. So we're seeing that in 2022, 26% of people said that that was the reason why they bought online, whereas 37% of folks are saying that now in 2024. So sort of, trying to look at that speed of delivery, as well as very similar numbers, 27% to 37% on greater product selection. So people are really seeing a difference online. When they're shopping online, they're going online because they want a greater product selection for their prescription eyewear.
So I'm going to make sure I got this right. So patients who are buying online are saying they're buying online because they believe their glasses can get to them faster. Glasses or contact lenses can get to them faster than buying it in person at an optometrist, at an ECP. And they think that online there's a better selection than what's offered to them at their ECP.
Yeah, that's what people are telling us when we ask, like, why did you buy online? I will say the top two reasons are better deals and convenience, which were holding pretty steady from 22 to 2024. So those other two, the speed of delivery and product selection, that's where we've seen the change over time.
Interesting. What's the number one reason why people buy from an ECP? Do they tell you?
Great question. I'd have to look at the report in full, but we do see, primarily that people are saying, like, I received an updated prescription is often, one of the reasons they're buying.
So that makes sense, right? Because that means that they went to they because they got an updated prescription, they ended up getting the glass because they were already there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
that makes sense.
Yep. So we also see insurance coverage, like the distance from their home and previous experience with the location are some of the key factors that drive purchases.
Interesting.
But we're still seeing that same in-network increase happening for eyewear as well as the exam. So 28% of people said reason why they bought in person in 2022 was because the location was in network. 36% said that in 2024.
Wow. Yeah, that's so. I mean, it's painting an interesting story, which is that patients who are buying from us are buying because they're there and because they have a good experience with their ECP. But we have to work harder for the sale, and also the consumer is more price sensitive. That data continues to ring true as no matter how you spin the Rubik's cube. I think we're putting it. The big picture looks like, hey, the consumer feels like they have less disposable income, whether that's true or not. That's how they feel, and so they are making decisions a little bit more closely with their wallet in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing that in our monthly consumer tracker survey where we ask people about how much they spend on their eyewear. And it's been a very clear pattern since the end of 2022 that the line that is showing people spending over $200 out of pocket is declining and has held pretty steady. And the number of people buying products with less than $100 out of pocket is taking up that same amount of space. So they started both at 35% in 2020 at the end of 2022, and now they're sitting at 40% are the budget buyers, and 30 or 31% are the more luxury buyers. So that's a real shift we're seeing in the market over the last 2 years.
Yeah, right. And again, to the typical to the typical optician, practice manager, and ECP listening to the show, that doesn't mean that the consumer is not going to spend it. What that means is that we just have to be more. We have to be better at presenting options and making it easier for them. They're not going to beg us to spend the money. They're going to. We have to make sure that they understand how it's in their best interest to spend what they need to spend in order to have not just a medical device, but a fashion accessory on their face for 16 hours a day. I mean, again. They probably also have 6 streaming services at home, and those feel like a good deal because I use them a couple hours a week or a couple hours a day in some cases. But I'm not willing to spend more than $200 on eyewear that I'm going to have on my face for 16 hours a day on the next for the next year. I mean, come on. I think we can do better as an industry. At least that's my opinion.
I think so too. What we see in our frames buyer survey, really quick to touch on that, is that we see of the frames board, people told us on average that 23% were the value or budget segment of frames, and about half were the mid-market, and about 26% were luxury. And so I think like rethinking your frame board, sort of those shares might be worthwhile as we're seeing, this increase toward the budget shopper. So just something to consider for the folks, in charge of that at their practice.
Yeah, that's great. And has that trended in a particular way, or is this the first time you guys did it?
This is the first time we've had this data, so I don't have any trends on that right now.
That's a really interesting one. So 23% are budget, about half the frame board is mid-range, and then 26% is luxury frames.
That's right. Yeah.
Interesting. And is there any data on perceived success or sell-through or anything like that in that frame buyer report?
We don't have anything about sell-through. We do see that there's a median number of about 600 frames on the frame board at a practice, which seems pretty big to me at least, but it does range overall, like we see most practices in that range of somewhere between 200 and 700. That's over half of the practices have that sort of on their frame boards. But we don't have anything about sell-through rate, but we do know, like from this survey, that people like the criteria that frame buyers are thinking about when they're buying product. The top of the list is consumer demand. And so that's sort of top of mind for folks. They're saying they're buying square and rectangle frames for the most part in terms of shapes.
Interesting. What are the least popular frames?
The
shape?
frame, I think it's geometric and aviator. But let me check real quick. All right, so we see the styles that eye care providers believe are most popular among their customers. So hoping this is based on data that they're tracking in their practice, but 81% are saying square. They could choose multiple options here. 63% say rectangular, 47% say cat eye, 35% round, 26% geometric, and 15% aviator.
Interesting. Well, so Alysse, you and I could talk data all day, and I think that for the sake of our audience, we should. I think we've summarized the point and kind of beat it to death. But I'll say it again: is that you guys have an incredible wealth of data about the market, and the data never, the data is our link to the consumer. The consumer is going to tell us what we need to do, and that's why I thought it was so important to bring you on the show early in 2024, so that we can listen to what our consumers told us in 2025 or in 2024, so that we can make good decisions for 2025. And I appreciate everything that you've shared with us. Thank you for giving us some early insights into this report that's dropping today, and very much appreciate you being on the show, Alysse, and Ashley as well. Thank you for both of your contributions to the Power Hour and for everything that you do in the industry.
Well, thanks for having me on, and looking forward to our next conversation.
Absolutely. Same here. Thanks for listening to today's Power Hour episode. The Power Hour is actually owned by the Power Practice. Power Practice is a premier consulting group who helps practices achieve freedom of time, confidently solve practice issues, and grow their practices. They do this by having coaches and OD consultants, people who have actually done it, been there, and they're ready to help. If you want to learn more, go to powerpractice.com. There's a bunch of free tools there. You can also get a whole bunch of information and decide whether it's right for your practice. Again, if you're looking for more time, you're looking to solve complex practice issues or grow, the Power Practice might be right for you. Go to powerpractice.com to find out more.